Welcome to GovInsider Live Studios, where we talk to brilliant global government innovators from across the world. Joining us today, he's founded a civic tech collective, Better.sg, that's bringing coders and hackers together to build systems and solutions that help us cope with COVID-19. Please welcome to the GovInsider Live studio, Gaurav Kirthi.
Hi everyone. Joshua, thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us today. So, a civic tech collective. What is civic tech?
It's an interesting question, and depending on which country you ask that question, you get a slightly different answer. So I'll start with what it is in other countries, and I'll explain what it means in Singapore. In a country like America, if you ask somebody what civic tech means, a large part of the work they do is about bringing the gap between the people and their democratic systems. So it's tools to get people's opinions heard, whether it's to their policymakers or politicians. It's tools to encourage people to get out there and vote. It's tools that help people get themselves better informed on specific votes. So it is a very much interface between the people and their political system. That's what civic tech largely focuses on in America. There are other aspects to it, but that's kind of the main bulk of tools that they work on. But that's not what it means for us in Singapore. In Singapore, what we look at for civic tech is basically how do we address societal issues with technology? And there are all sorts of ways in which we can do that. There are all sorts of tools that we can build to do that. But broadly speaking, the goal is to try and bring out the best in society. And how do we change people's behaviors, change people's thinking, change people's understanding of the world around them using technology?
And this collective has been around for some time. I think it was founded last year. But certainly, I think in Singapore, we've seen it come to the forefront as COVID-19 emerged. Tell us how civic tech is helping to build systems that can help us cope with COVID-19.
It's funny that you should mention the start because so we started mulling this idea over in earnest about October last year. And when we started this, it was a group of us who have been building tools for fun on the side for many years now. So I've been building tools since about 2006, 07 even. So we've been building websites, web apps, mobile apps to do tech for good, but it wasn't called tech for good back then. But back in October 2019, when we got together, we were thinking, does society even need this? Is there a problem that really exists that needs to be solved? Why can't we just rely on the government or rely on volunteer welfare organizations to solve these problems instead? What is the value of tech for good? And in October 2019, we really struggled to get that message out. We were trying to persuade people to join us. We had a small group of like 20, 30 people who thought, yeah, maybe this is a clever idea. We'll banter a little bit. We'll discuss a few fun things we could build with tech. Fast forward like 4 months, COVID comes about. It becomes a global pandemic. It becomes a life-defining, kind of life-changing experience for everybody. And because now everybody's at home, the only way they interface with the outside world is through technology. So suddenly, we're seeing this explosion of demand for technology tools that help people. And what does help people mean? It really depends on which community you ask. There are people, ordinary people like us, who are trapped in our homes, but generally nice homes, reliable internet access. What does helping them mean? Sometimes it's getting them information. Sometimes, and for the really wonderful people out there, it's about giving them access to ways to help other people. One of the very early tools we built in this was a tool called Mask Go Share. A little bit of a pun on the government tool Mask Go Wear. The idea was that many people had already stockpiled a significant amount of masks in their house, more than they need. And it was coming out in the news that many vulnerable parts of our society just didn't have access to masks. Either they were unable to afford them, unable to afford the time to go and get them, but for whatever reason, just didn't have masks. They didn't have hand sanitizer. And so we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find a way to get those people with extra supplies to share with those people who didn't have the supplies or access to those supplies? We built a very simple tool. It was a 2-day kind of sprint with a few developers. And it went live, and we really didn't know what to expect. We basically just listed out a bunch of addresses for rental flats, low-income neighborhoods around you, and we hoped that people would make anonymous drop-offs. We were young and inexperienced, so we didn't track what happened. But anecdotally, we do know that many people did use the tool, organizations used it, and eventually another tool was built called Contribute.sg, which took that idea and built a huge logistics chain behind it. So really the idea of centralizing the donations, centralizing the distribution. And so tech in that case was a very small seed, but it grew into something very large. So that's what helping us means.
We are live
yeah,
now on Facebook Live. So if you've seen great civic tech, please pop it in the comments section, and please also share this on your profile as well. And I think some of the systems that I've seen that have been really interesting have either been around supporting migrant workers. There's been some interesting translation tools, and there's also been some things in the food and beverage space as well. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about those systems and how they arose.
Sure. So as the COVID spread through kind of countries, in Singapore in particular, we noticed that a population that was pretty hard struck was migrant workers, largely those staying in kind of big foreign worker dormitories. And so our healthcare system had to move into the dormitories to go and do testing and work with them directly. And a lot of the workers were coming to hospitals. But you don't have that as a normal kind of day-to-day traffic in a hospital. Your doctors don't interact with Bangladeshi or Urdu or Vietnamese or Thai people on a daily basis. So the language skills, the idea of translating specific medical terminology into other languages wasn't a concept back then. But all of a sudden, in the span of 48 hours, it became an urgent national need. Technology kits, it fits perfectly in that space. You have an urgent need. We have people who have access to the resources, which are translators, people who speak the language natively. And we're able to bring those two together to build simple tools. And the very first iteration of this tool was by this lady named Dr. Sudesna. And so she built a simple website with a bunch of sentences. She's a doctor, so she built a bunch of sentences that she thinks doctors would ask a patient, translated into Bangladeshi. A bunch of her friends got together and translated in a few other languages. We bumped into another developer who was using something like this to build a website. And we saw a couple of designers who were building interfaces for this. So what Better did was we kind of put everybody together in the same virtual room and said, look, all of you guys care about the same issue. Let's work together, build a nice interface, work on a robust database, get the translators together, and get this tool out there. And it was literally over the span of a weekend. Everybody worked late night. Some even worked overnight. We even outsourced some of the translation to people in the US, simply because then on the time zone wise, while we're sleeping, they continue to work. And so it's fantastic how we got people together, and we had Singaporeans kind of scattered all around the world who were willing to help. But that tool addressed a very urgent need. Doctors needed to communicate, and patients needed to understand. And one of the interesting lessons we learned, and one of the questions we asked was, why not just use Google Translate? What we realized was that the languages that people speak, the vernacular that migrant workers speak, is different from the way that technology thinks we should be speaking. So one of the funnier anecdotes was if you ask somebody whether you have diabetes, the linguistically correct phrase apparently translates to a term that people don't use. The term that people use ordinarily in Bangladesh is, do you urinate high sugar? I mean, no computer is going to tell you that. But if you know their vernacular, you understand how that works. And I didn't know this myself. I don't speak Bangladeshi. But that was one of the funnier ones. But it was a very useful tool. And now it's morphed into many other kind of iterations of it. And then this F&B. Very early on in this whole COVID crisis, restaurants were hard hit. Bars were hard hit. You can't go into a restaurant, you can't dine in. And many of them had not thought about building kind of online ordering systems or linking up with delivery drivers or even signing themselves up for the big tech delivery platforms. So they were kind of left in the lurch abruptly. Again, Tech for Good has a great opportunity to build something small, light, and immediately usable. So we built a number of tools actually to address this problem. Some of them were small and light, like buying coupons for your favorite restaurant. The thinking was that these restaurants need a little bit of cash to survive. You want to support them, and a coupon's win-win. You know that you can go back in a few months and claim that whatever $50 coupon, and the restaurant knows that they have $50 of cash right now, which is they can pay their rent, they can pay their workers. Some of them were more ambitious. There was a directory of all of the hawker centers in Singapore to help you kind of order, and the mobile numbers of all of the hawker owners, so you can directly contact them and go do a pickup. And then some were trying to match freelance delivery drivers with hawker stall owners using kind of chat interfaces and all that. But the idea was basically look, there's a problem. There's a social problem where a lot of these hawker stall owners, particularly, were just not tech savvy. And for various reasons, they didn't have to be tech savvy. But all of a sudden, they need to rely on technology to get their orders out there. So whether it's creating a Facebook group, building an app, building a tool, these were just many of the ways in which the Tech for Good community, and just to be clear, the Tech for Good community exists in an ecosystem far bigger than Better.sg, but we're kind of at the nexus of connecting all of these strings together.
And I'm sure people can go to the Better.sg website to see a directory of these services. And actually, there's a great podcast on there as well that I'd personally recommend. We put out a call for questions for you. And one of the questions that we had come in was, what persuades people to do this? They're doing this for free. They're building tech for good, not for profit. What's motivating them to build these systems, which must take quite a lot of work and sophistication and effort?
So this is not my first time in a volunteer organization. I've been volunteering many different capacities and learned a lot along the way. And one of the lessons that I've learned very early on about volunteer organizations is that passion is contagious. Passion is really contagious. If you have people in your team who are just fundamentally good, honest, earnest, loving, passionate people about their purpose, about that mission, it spreads like wildfire. And so my job was not to teach people how to do things, but to find the people who had that fire burning in them, that passion to help other people. I'm an optimist. I believe in the innate goodness of human nature. But how do we gather these people, harness that goodness, and direct it at certain, specific problems? And so a lot of the work that I did as a community organizer was finding the right people and organizing them together and pointing them in one direction, just kind of structuring that process. People are passionate about helping others. What deters most people from volunteering, and this is one thing that we're actually quite proud of in Better.sg, is that the traditional model of volunteering is a very time-intensive, rigid model. You either give up your Saturday afternoons or you don't volunteer. There's kind of no way around it. If you want to clean the beach, you have to give up 4 hours of a block of time and clean the beach. That's the constraint of the real world. And there are models in which that is necessary. There's no other nice way to clean the beach. You need to give up time to do it. But for Tech for Good, actually, we found that we could design our entire process to be work from home, to be work anytime, to be an online and somewhat asynchronous activity. Meaning, if you just want to contribute 10 minutes of your time every day or every week, that's perfectly fine. And we do have, as a result of this model being slightly different, people who ordinarily would not volunteer. We have doctors who are very busy. We have parents of children, school going, who ordinarily is too exhausted to spend many hours in the day volunteering. But because this model is light, scalable, they can dip their toe in the water little by little and see how they want to fit into the system. And this kind of goes to the nature of Tech for Good and Better, it's multidisciplinary. If we're going to build a tool to help migrant workers, well, I need to work with not just people who are database specialists and user interface designers. I need to work with translators. I need to work with nurses. I need to work with other doctors. And these are people who are really busy, particularly the ones who are at the front line kind of doing the real work. They don't have time to sit around for 4 hours and work with a designer or developer. But they do have 10 minutes between lunch break to get on a Skype call and answer a few questions. And that's all we ask for them. So volunteering is lighter in this model. And I think that gets us a little bit more access to a community.
And this isn't just about COVID-19, of course. I remember when you set it up last year, there were all sorts of other issues, racism in hiring, for instance, that you were planning to address. Tell us how Civic Tech can help tackle some of those problems that maybe government isn't best placed to be doing.
Yeah, so actually when we started this in October, discrimination is an issue that I've cared about for a long time. And I'm very proud of growing up in a multiracial, multicultural society, but I know it's quite fragile and I don't want to comment too much about it, but what we're seeing in the world around us today, it's tragic and horrific. But I think that there is a way that tech can address those issues. Fundamentally, people make decisions and people's behavior is driven by how they see the world. And how they see the world is increasingly being shaped by what they get on the internet. What Facebook tells you, what Google tells you, what Twitter tells you, that's what you imagine the world to be like, because we're all stuck at home. Nobody's actually interacting with the world firsthand. So there must be a way, since all of these are technologies anyway, there must be a way in which we can shape the information that you get to change the views that you have, to change your attitude towards the world. If you believe that all the members of a certain race are good for nothings, because that's the information you're getting on social media, then you will believe that all members of a certain race are good for nothings, because you've got no contrary evidence. But if we can shape the information that you're getting to show you cases where that's not true, to challenge your perception, then maybe you can understand things a bit differently. And I'll talk about one specific tool that we've already deployed. We hear a lot about microaggressions and casual racism, micro-racism. There's many terms for it, but it's small, often unintentional gestures or words or phrases that are used by people that aren't intended to directly cause harm, but because of the way that they're said or because of the historical baggage behind those words, they cause offense to the recipient. But it's hard to tell what causes harm and what doesn't cause harm. It's really difficult for a person, because of your own experiences. I've grown up in a certain world. To me, that's not offensive. I mean, my friends have said this all the time. I don't understand why you find it offensive. So it's hard for us to calibrate that. Wouldn't it be great if there was a tool, and we built one called okayornot.sg, where people can put in different phrases and others can go through them and say, well, that's okay, that's not, that's okay, that's not. And then you can see different communities treat the same statement differently. What might be perfectly acceptable for you and what you think is actually okay to say might be very unacceptable for me to hear. And so once we get that and we match the demographics with the statement, then hopefully you and I can understand that something that I've been saying actually is really offensive to you, and something that you've been saying is really offensive to me. And we may not have known that because we just don't know how to calibrate these things. And again, technology, it's a very simple and light tool. It's really like Tinder. You're swiping left and right on whether you think a statement is okay or not. But a simple tool like that then suddenly challenges your perception about something you've said all your life. And so that's how we think changing small behaviors, changing the information around you can actually bring out the best in society.
And we're on Facebook Live, so we're going to tag better.sg in this as well. But how can people get involved in the Civic Tech Collective if they wish to?
The smallest and easiest way for you to participate is just to visit the website and use the tools. There are people out there who have given up their time, their nights, their weekends to build these things. Get out there and use them. Spread them, share them, make them useful. The thing that makes people in our community feel happiest is when their tools actually add value to people's lives, when they're actually used and when they're useful. So the first and the easiest way to do it is just go there, find a tool that you like and use it. And we have a variety of tools solving a variety of issues. Just find one.
What a fantastic...
And if you can...
Carry on, please.
Yeah. The second thing is if you can give us feedback about a problem that you're facing or a way in which the tool can be better, that would be even greater. And finally, if you want to join us, please do. You don't need to be a technologist. You just need to understand how you think technology could help. And that just requires you to be generally tech savvy. But we look forward to having a huge multidisciplinary group of members who are really passionate about this.
Fantastic. What a great initiative. That's better.sg. Gaurav Kirthi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Joshua.
Take care. We're partnering with Micro Focus for GovInsider Live Studios, and joining us now is Neil Pandya, the cybersecurity specialist for Asia Pacific and Japan at Micro Focus. Thank you for joining us, Neil.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having us here.
And you're an expert in DevSecOps and how organizations can quickly adapt to COVID-19. Can you tell us what DevSecOps is and how can organizations quickly adapt?
That's a really good question, and so timely as well, right? So the moment we started to work remotely, there was a lot of things that we may have had to do with our applications. Some of the functionality was more for people working within a set perimeter in your corporate network. So DevSecOps is about bringing application security into your DevOps practice. DevOps has been around for a little while, and DevOps is really about laying down a platform for building applications and the whole application software development lifecycle, right from where we have developers writing code and how that code moves into testing and then UAT and then how it moves into production. So having all of those controls in place. Now, DevSecOps is all about having that security as part of that software development lifecycle. You may have heard of the term shifting left. And what we mean by shifting left is we do testing earlier. We do the application security testing and not just the unit testing and the functional testing early on as well. So shifting left means doing as much of this as early on in the software development lifecycle as possible. And what that means, and it's quite appropriate for the kind of time that we're in now, is that we mitigate risk. We can speed up the deployment of applications far quicker. So if you think about all of those mobile apps that you've downloaded to help you get into, to read all those QR codes so you can get into buy your groceries and so on, or pick up your takeaway. Imagine that not performing well. And you're sitting there and you're looking at your phone and the wheel's spinning around and it's a real hot day and you're wearing your mask, you're going to get very frustrated. So we make sure that those mobile applications are tested for performance and also tested for security as well.
What are some of the risks and the challenges that organizations should be aware of at the moment?
Well, it's a really good question again. I think that one of the challenges that we have is making sure that we can allow individuals, just like you and me, to be able to function like we would normally do in our corporate environment. So we can do the things that we normally do at work, do emailing, answering emails on my phone, connecting to applications, approving things like workflow, still need to do that. If you think about if you're doing a payroll responsibility, you need to approve payroll so people can get paid. Now you're having to do that remotely. So all of these things we need to kind of consider, making sure that application functionality is still available, irrespective of where you're working from, but also making sure that that security has been built in as well. You may also need to build new functionality because of the changes in our circumstance. So as you build that new functionality, how do we make sure that it's going to be secure and it's going to be performant as well?
And how does Micro Focus help agencies across the world to mitigate their cyber risks?
That's a really good question, because we have a very good platform around all of that. So when we call it the supply chain, we actually can help you secure that complete software supply chain. So if you think about right from when a developer, you onboard a developer to help you develop some software, how they connect to your infrastructure, your network, right from there to them getting a workstation to start developing and writing code on, from there on to how the code is being developed and tested, and how that code moves into a code repository, and how they access code within the code repository, and how that code moves into a UAT to a production environment. We have security controls all around that. So we have identity and access management when you authenticate your network. When we provision a workstation for you to work on, we make sure we scan that workstation for any vulnerabilities, and we do patching. So that's all our infrastructure monitoring technologies that we have. Then when you move into downloading any software, we make sure that we can catalog that software, making sure that the software that you download is not out of compliance for my organization. And then when you start writing code, we will scan that code, we'll test that code for vulnerabilities. Now, we also have a risk, right? We have developers, we may need to onboard developers very, very quickly, remotely. A lot of people that I know have joined companies, they moved jobs during this time, and some of them have a developer role. So now they're developing code, never ever been to an office, but they're developing code on a workstation somewhere that may be deployed maybe on cloud, and developing code. Now, we don't know the level of trust we have with some of these individuals, especially if they're new. So how you write code to a repository, how you access that code, we can monitor all of that as well in case there's any insider breach associated with that, and protection of intellectual property as well, and then how that code moves through the supply chain.
And you also work with cities and governments on digital enablement across the world. What are you doing in that space?
And how important is digital at the moment? Everything that we're doing, together with this call, is all digital. The more we enable the digital transformation for organizations, the more they can cope. What we've seen is that organizations that digitally transformed pre-COVID have actually fared a lot better. The impact's been far less on them. So we want to really encourage that. And the Micro Focus platform has been a big part of driving that transformation, that digital transformation. It might have been big data analytics, it might have been IoT, it might have been moving towards the DevSecOps platform that we talked about earlier. So all of those transformations, we've been a big part of that. And identity actually drives digital transformation strongly. So we've been involved in a lot of projects like that post-COVID. I think there'll be an increase in how we digitally transform, purely because it's going to help us be more resilient.
And now let's look ahead to the future. What are the trends that particularly excite you?
I love this question. I'm really looking forward to post-COVID, because I think that on reflection, we're going to really see the need to collaborate. I think we're going to see the need for technology organizations to exercise their civic responsibility and build stronger relationships with government agencies, and looking at the key areas where we can really embed the digital transformation in all our projects. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to see how we can encourage greater citizen participation across the board. One of the things that Micro Focus has been involved in for a number of years is the smart cities initiatives in India. And we've done projects around healthcare. We've done projects around surveillance, CCTV cameras, and making all of that information very, very useful, where we can look at the data we collect and move that into an analytics platform, perform analytics to give us really useful insights. So I think that projects like this, which will make us a lot more resilient to change and impact of crises like this, are going to be really important. So I'm really excited about that, right, Josh?
And if people want to work with Micro Focus further, how can they get in touch? What should they do?
Oh, they just reach out, visit our websites, look at some of the areas that we've been involved in. There are a lot of projects that we're involved in globally, but in terms of transformation, we have a big hand in that. Whether you're moving to cloud, you're moving workloads to cloud, whether you're developing new applications, mobile apps, whether you want infrastructure to be monitored, and also to do patching and so on. We've been involved in a number of different areas. So the best way to reach out is having a look at our websites, and you'll get a lot of information there. But we have a presence in a lot of the Southeast Asia countries, so we can combine and run through some of the areas that we can really help you with your transformation.
Thank you very much, Neil, for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, Josh. Likewise. You take care now.
Thanks for joining us today. Why not tune in same time next week for Xiaohui Huang, President of the Cybersecurity Chapter of the Singapore Computer Society. And on 7th of July, we're with the Governor of West Java for GovInsider Live Indonesia. See you again soon.